I'm Nicole, aka Fairies and Fancies, and I'm going to teach you guys how to make a simple one-part silicone mold. So what is a mold? Molding is just the act of creating a reverse impression of a model so you can replicate it. You can start with either a model you purchased or a model you made yourself. So what is silicone? Silicone is a type of synthetic rubber, and it can be used in a variety of ways, primarily in mold making. Anything from making candies to special effects. When it comes to types of silicone, there are so many, and I don't want to overwhelm you or confuse you. You can check out Smooth-On's website, and it goes over all the different types of silicone. I'm going to be using the MoldStar series, which I think is very beginner friendly. I'll be using MoldStar 15 Slow because it's easy to use and it gives a longer work time of 50 minutes. You don't have to vacuum degas it, and it's an easy 1-to-1 mixture ratio. Some silicones require vacuum degassing, so make sure you're aware of that. So let's understand some stuff about silicone itself. It comes in a 2-part mixture. For this, it's a 1-to-1. There's a part A and a part B. You're going to be mixing these together to make your mold. As you can see, each side has a different color and a very thick viscosity. On the back of Smooth-On products, there's a nice little visual aid that helps you understand how to use the product and links to resources and tutorials right on the side of the box. What I love about using Smooth-On products is they come with this really awesome sheet. It explains everything you need to know, like how to mix it, how long you have to work with it, which is the pot life, the cure time is how long it takes to set up, and how stretchy, which is your shore hardness. It also comes with safety data sheets, which are really important when working with any product. The instructions also let you know what materials to stay away from when using this type of silicone. Mainly latex, sulfur, certain woods, and certain other rubbers. It's always important to read the directions before you start any project. Now let's go over types of molds. I'm going to mainly go over 3 different kinds. We're going to be starting with a simple 1-part mold. That's what we're making today. And they primarily look like this. This is a split mold, which you might be able to guess by its appearance. It's split down the sides to allow the figure to come out. This is a 2-part mold. These are a lot more complex and involve 2 pieces that lock together with a special type of texture that's imprinted into the silicone itself. Let's talk about the figure you're going to use for your mold. Now, picking or creating a figure is important. I've made a lot. Simple figures are going to be way easier to mold and cast, so are a good option for beginners. Anything with little crevices and tons of detail may cause issues. Silicone is amazing at picking up detail, but just remember, it will pick up any flaws in your models as well, so you want to make sure that they're as flawless as you can get them. And try to remember that most 1-part molds, your figure will be upside down. So that's something to think about considering air pockets and gravity, which we'll talk about later. I'm going to demonstrate here how 2 figures that look very close can be modeled in totally separate ways, and how one can be easy and one can be fairly challenging, especially for a beginner. First, we're going to draw our fake mold. So we're going to pretend that this guy is already in his mold, filled with silicone. Like I said, most models are going to be upside down and filled from the top part, where his feet would be. And when you pour the resin in or whatever you're using to cast, it will fill up from the head all the way to the feet. It will sit upside down in your model. So that's something you need to think about when picking a figure. Now we're going to do the same thing for this figure, but things are going to get a lot more complicated. There's going to be air pockets that get trapped here unless we add some vents. Vents allow the resin to fill up all the way so that air pockets don't get trapped. Those are going to have to be cut off and sanded after you remove the figure. Now to free this guy, we're going to have to do cuts to be able to pull the figure out. Now you can see how a simple difference in figures can make it way more complicated. I forgot to show that it would need even more cuts. So as you can see, two similar models are going to be molded in completely separate ways. Here's an example of a split mold. This is what it would look like. There's vents that lead to the ears so that the ears could fill up entirely, and then I'd cut those off and sand them after casting. This is a much more complicated mold, and I don't recommend it unless you have some experience. We're going to be going with the first version. Just know that overly detailed pieces with deep cracks or crevices can be hard to cast, and air bubbles can get stuck in those areas, especially if you're not pressure casting. If your mold comes out with too many problem areas, you can always fix your figure and then remold it. You'll see a lot of this white clay on my figures. These are problem areas that I identified after sculpting or realized later and filled in with epoxy sculpt. Once you have your figure, it's time to make the mold. Let's talk about what you'll need. I like to use this grid poster board. I get this at Walmart. It has grids, which makes it easy for cutting, and it has a nice smooth side with a little bit of lamination. That'll keep the silicone from sticking to it. You need a glue gun, glue sticks, clear contact paper, tape. Of course, you'll need your silicone, cups to mix everything, something to stir with. I'm using a butter knife and an old spatula. Of course, you're going to need your cute little model and a very hard surface to build your mold box on. We also can't forget the safety gear, nitrile gloves, and safety goggles. Now there's two ways I go about making my molds. This is the shortcut way. You can simply hot glue your figure right to your hard surface, and then you're going to build your mold box around it. Now, the problem can come with the glue. It might leave an edge you have to clean up after. And you might need to use a tool to get out any bubbles that may get stuck under there. It's faster, but it's a little harder to work with. My second method gives the top of the mold a nice, clean, crisp edge and nowhere for those bubbles to hide. You're going to want to start off with that contact paper and cut out a piece that's slightly bigger than your model. Now this may sound odd, but it'll make sense. You want to flip it with the sticky side up and then use tape to stick it to the surface. It's a little tricky, but you'll get there. To make the actual mold box, we're going to take our grid paper and use it to help us measure. We want 1/2 to 1 inch above our figure. Then you're going to cut it out using the grid. You want room on top of your figure so that you have enough silicone to go over the top of it. You want to make sure you leave a 1/2 inch space between the wall of the mold box and the figure. Then you're going to tape the inside of the mold box at the seam where it connects. Make sure it's taped really well because you don't want any silicone slipping out of that seam. Then you can cut off your excess, and I tape the outside of the seam as well because silicone can be sneaky and it will get out of the tiniest hole. So make sure your seams are sealed really well. Your mold box should look a little bit like this. Now we can stick our figure down on that contact paper and do a test fit. Now for measuring how much silicone you're going to need. Look, you can use math equations. It gets complicated. I don't do the math, so I'm going to show you what I do that usually works out well. I will say in time you can usually guess how much silicone you're going to need. What I do is I make excess molds. In case I have too much silicone, it doesn't go to waste and I can just make another mold. So I'm going to be doing that. Now, before you even start to measure out your silicone, you want to mix it. Mix it really well in the container. I did that and forgot to film it, so this is me miming it, looking like an idiot. But yes, make sure you stir them before you pour them, and then you can mix them. You want to take equal sides of part A and part B and mix them together Don't be an idiot like me and forget to put on your safety equipment when you are making an actual tutorial. Come on now. We're wearing nitrile gloves. We'll keep it safe. And remember, no latex gloves. Another reason the Mold Star series of silicone is so great is that it has 2 different colors, side A and B. That means you can see once it's mixed really well. You want to scrape the sides of the container you're mixing in and also whatever you're using to mix, and you want to make sure it's a nice even color and that there's no streaks at all. If you have a very detailed figure, this tip may help you out. You want to take an old paintbrush you don't care about and coat your figure in silicone. You want to make sure you get into all the little details and cracks and crevices. Here you can see I just want to work it into every little detail. This makes sure the silicone gets into any of those hard to reach areas. And you can coat your entire piece like this. You want to do this before you put your mold box on so you can reach it. Then you're going to want to take your hot glue and glue down that mold box. Use a lot of glue. Don't be skimpy. I have gone skimpy on the glue, and then my mold box has detached from the bottom and silicone has gone everywhere. So yeah, really pour it on. You want it nice and secure, and you want to make sure there's no holes or any way for that silicone to escape. Here you can see everybody's nice and tucked in their mold boxes. Now the smooth on directions are going to tell you exactly how to pour, but I'll explain it and show it to you visually. You want to start in one area and pour in that one area. This allows the silicone to flow naturally around your entire bottle and pick up all the detail without introducing a bunch of air bubbles. So you need to have a little bit of patience and a little bit of a steady hand. Pick one spot and just let the silicone do the work. I never get sick of watching this, it's so fun. Now you want to make sure you leave that 1/2 inch of silicone above your figure. I'm using a tool here to help me measure, kind of like if I was checking my oil with the dipstick. Now here's a sped up version to show you how that silicone will naturally flow into all of the details. For any messes, I like to use baby wipes. They help get up that sticky silicone really easily, so I always have them on hand. One thing I always do is I let my mold sit for a bit, and I allow that silicone to settle and see if it's going to squeeze out of any areas, and then I just take my hot glue gun and I fill up any spots it's trying to leak out of. You can also cure your molds in a pressure pot. I do pressure casting, so that's how I do mine, but it's completely unnecessary. This is a little more advanced, so we're just going to kind of skip over this. Temperature matters, and it's something you should be aware of when curing silicone. Colder temperatures, it's going to take longer for your silicone to cure. If it's too cold, your silicone may not cure at all. Since it's cooler in my room, I'm going to give the silicone an extra hour to firm up. You're going to want to give it some professional squishes and make sure that it's cured all the way. Now we want to open up our mold boxes and take a look at our brand new molds. The great thing about using this paper as a mold box is you can simply tear it away and expose your mold. You're just going to carefully pull the silicone away from your figure. You want to try to be gentle, especially if you have a hand-sculpted figure. You don't want to break that figure taking it out of the mold. If your model does break when you're pulling it out of the mold, it's no big deal. What you can do is the first time you cast something in your mold, just keep that and use it as your master. The first cast in a mold is always the best, as molds degrade over use. So you want to keep that first one for yourself if you need a new master or a spare master. I like to keep 2, the hand-sculpted one and the first casted one. This is the second time I've molded this guy. The first time the antenna broke off, I repaired it, and as you can see, I molded him again, and it picked up all the details. Now, when you make a silicone mold, the bottom or the top at this point will leave a little bit of a rim. You want to cut that off. I'm using a little cuticle remover tool, but I said screw that. Let's just use some scissors. It's a lot faster. This is going to help your mold stay flat. You want a flat mold when casting or your cast can come out wonky. We don't want wonky casts. You can even trim the top if you're fancy. I do it just because I find it very satisfying. And here they are, all trimmed up and ready for casting. Now, not every cast will be perfect, and that's okay. Almost all flaws can be fixed, either with epoxy sculpt or with UV resin if you're using a transparent epoxy. One thing I try to do if I have something like these antennas with deep cavities and details, you can squeeze them to get the air bubbles out and make sure that all the resin gets down into those holes. Don't use any sharp tools or be too forceful as you could damage the silicone. You can also use silicone tools and carefully work out any bubbles that get stuck in certain areas. If your casts come out with any bubbles or flaws like this, you can fill them with UV resin or repair them like I am with this sculpt and use epoxy sculpt. It's a 2-part epoxy and really easy to use. You can also spray or coat your mold on the inside with a mold release, which will extend the life of your mold and make it a lot easier to pull your casts out. Here you can see I made some epoxy Mothman. And here, this is a urethane resin cast, which is completely opaque and perfect for painting. Now, how to clean a mold. There are different ways to go about it, and some are a little more labor intensive than others. You can clean molds by washing them with water and a tiny bit of soap, or by using tape or a lint roller inside and outside the mold to pick up any dust or glitter or anything like that stuck to your mold. Or if you're me, dog hair, because man does it love to stick to silicone. So before I cast, usually I try to give them a nice little cleanup. Now, storing your molds. One thing I learned making this video and doing some research is that I was doing it wrong. You want to clean your molds before storing them. You want to make sure you store your molds in a single flat layer and not a jumble like I did, so that they don't warp. Storing molds incorrectly can actually permanently distort your molds, which I had no idea. You want to make sure you're storing it in a covered container to keep them clean and away from the sun or the heat. I've been molding and casting for 6 years, so I know it can be a lot of information. I tried to make this tutorial simple and clear to help any beginner just get started. You'll learn so much through experimenting yourself, so give it a shot. Here you can see all the cool effects and things that I've made, and if you want to make your own tiny Mothman, I have a video of that as well. But I love molding and casting, and it's allowed me to make so many cool things. And if you want to get started, I hope you do. Please tag me, please show me, I want to see it all. Thank you so much for watching. And if you don't want to miss out on future videos, make sure you subscribe.